Members the low of our. Did terrible.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'd like to call this Planning and Development Committee meeting to order on October 4th, 9 a.m. Approval of the agenda. Any late items on the agenda? No, everybody's good. Have a few people online. We have Nicole online, Bryant and Labouré, and we have Deb Heap online. So that's great.
And Pam.
Those that I can see. And Pam as well, too. Welcome. Okay.
Morning.
Nothing to add to the agenda. So will the Planning and Development Committee meeting agenda be approved as circulated? A motion for that? John, second, Ian, thank you. Adoption of the minutes, approval of the minutes, actually. Recommended that the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee meeting held on September 6, 2022 be adopted. Everybody had a look at those? Okay, can I have a mover? John, seconder? Deb, thank you. Just making sure you're there. Okay. All right, Planning and Service Development update. Nicole, are you going to take that away?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, definitely feeling like I have better grip on some of these applications that we have in the current applications list. So starting from the top, 21083 DP for 102 Martin Street. I did leave a message for the owner, and they connected with me yesterday. So it sounds like this development permit is actually on hold. They plan to bring a zoning application to us first. So we're going to take this one off our current applications, and we should be seeing a zoning application in the next couple weeks, maybe at the end of the month for PDC. 21361 DP, so this is 534 Main Street. We received a preliminary determination from the province regarding site contamination, that it's not contaminated. And right now the province is in a public comment period, so this isn't a final determination. And the owner's engineer has submitted another report to the province for the final determination. So we're still waiting on an answer for that. Public comment period's about 30 days or longer, depending on if they get comments about it. And then the other piece is there's a traffic impact study that we've received, and the district staff are working through those recommendations. For 23071 DP, yeah, it sounds like it might be a demo. I don't know, they might be using the shell, but I did connect with the owner. It's not quite on their radar yet, but they do have some information in at the province as well for site contamination, and they're waiting for a response. I've connected with the province, they've connected with the province, and we're just kind of waiting on that. When they hear back from that, then they can prioritize with their other projects when this one comes in. 23160 DP, so this is 113 Wet Up. Another one where we're waiting for a determination from the province about site contamination. I also followed up with them on this one. It sounds like they have a huge backlog. I've made a good connection with the Ministry of Environment, so hopefully we can hear back on some of these and kind of get a gauge where we're at and where we might be going with them on our end. And then the last one on this list is 23236, 100 Archibald. The agent supplied an amended environmental impact assessment as part of a watercourse development permit, and the province needs to approve that report before we can issue our DVP. So that one is also pending, but in the works, actively in the works. I talked to the professional doing the report, and they're in connection with the province on the daily. And then the next slide. I won't talk about 515 Dogwood Avenue because I will be presenting that in a few minutes here. And then 23256 DP, that's 918 Riverside Avenue. Oh yes, I did leave a message with the owner. They also have some other projects in town, so this one might not be top of mind for them, but I'm guessing they're gonna need some approvals from the province, so we're kind of in that waiting game as well. Norton Court, we could probably take that one off. I think everyone knows a resolution was passed at a special council meeting on September 27th. So that should be going, and they also have a building permit, so hopefully we're seeing some action on that property. And then last, I will not speak to as well because Sarah's going to present on 1436 Silver Sands Road today. Questions?
Great, thank you, Nicole. Any questions? Can't, has Deb got anything? I can't see Deb there, but.
No.
All good.
Right.
Nicole, I just asked on that, on the one on the waterfront, have we looked into the 3 meter walkway right away for that property, or are we kind of, maybe that's something we can review on our topics for the next year? So I just wondered if you had inquired about that.
Yeah, it's definitely on our radar for that. Are you talking about Riverside or?
Yeah, the one on Riverside for the waterfront walkway.
Yes, yeah. No, and we should for sure review that when I guess the file kind of gets going again. Yeah, top of mind, 3 meter.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question about the McLean McPherson proposed A&W. So they're not planning on redeveloping that right now? Okay.
No, they have some other projects ongoing that they're not in town, but it won't be in town, but across the province. And so this one's kind of in their list, top of the list, but not quite ready to action.
Yeah, I'm the only reason I asked, I think we have to be very careful with that corner. We have, you know, Dairy Queen going in and a couple other, I think, proposed shops. We already have an existing drive-through, and then I think they want to propose another drive-through on an intersection we already know is a big red flag for ministry, and it's already, I think it's deemed a failed intersection already, right? So I just want to like flag that. That might be something we want to look at too when we go back and take another stab at bylaw 1000, what the land use provisions in that area should be. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
No, thank you.
Great, okay, that's good. Deb, you're good. John, you all right?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Nicole. All right, moving right along, new business. 23-288 development variance permit, 1436 Silver Sands Road. That's Sarah. You want to take that away? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. All right, so here's the location on Silver Sands Road. It's on the other side of the Trans-Canada and the railway. It backs onto the lagoon there. So it is designated in the official community plan as low density residential and is zoned R1 and 2 unit residential. Next slide. So the proposal here is to demolish a portion of the existing deck on the south side of the dwelling unit so that they can construct a screen room. So this has to do with ensuring there's proper footings. So I need to take down part of the deck. And it's being sited so that it's outside of where we're fairly sure is the edge of the SPIA, Streamside Protection Enhancement Area that's associated with the lagoon. So we've got a side image here of what the screen room will look like and site plan here. Next slide. So they're asking for a variance so that the screen room, they want to line it up with the existing development that's there. So there's the existing deck there, and there's also another screen room there that's closer to the water. So they want to reduce the side yard setback from 1.5 meters to 1.2 meters so that it can all line up. Next slide. So here's some site photos. You can see the white box there on the left image. That would be the area where the screen room will go. You can see that there's already an existing solid cedar fence and there's some screening vegetation between them and the abutting property. There's a second shot here from the street. Doesn't really look like, you know, there'll be any kind of impacts associated with the variance. Next slide. So in terms of discussion, setback matches existing developments, why they're asking for that. There's existing screening. If the variances are supported by council, they will then move forward with the watercourse development permit. So the property, so you can see like from the blue lines it put on the site plan, it's pretty much inside the whole property, inside the development permit area for watercourse protection. And that doesn't mean that they can't continue using the property the way they do. It's just anything new has to be outside of that, wherever the STIA is, the stream site protection enhancement area. So from prior experience on the lagoon, we're fairly certain that it's 15 meters, but it would of course need to be confirmed and verified by qualified environmental QEP professional and approved by the province so that we can move forward. And we know that process has gotten a lot faster now. So we don't expect that to take too long once they get going with this. And so they have talked with the building department and they know that they need to meet fire separation requirements from the BCBC. And then otherwise, you know, our other departments didn't have a lot of concerns other than the fire chief, you know, likes to make note that because it's on the other side of the rail line, it's outside of the 10-minute response area for fire protection. And he doesn't generally support any kind of variances in those situations. Next slide. So as far as the recommendation goes, we propose that it be the way we've done this in the past, where variance is approved, but we just hang on to it. We don't issue it until the watercourse development permit is approved. That will confirm that the siting of the building is compliant with the riparian areas regulation. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, well, I'll read the recommendation that the Planning and Development Committee recommend that the District of Sicamous authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 23-288-DVP on the condition that the issuance be withheld until a watercourse development permit for the proposed screen room has been issued for the subject property located at Lot 36, District Lot 452, KDYD Plan 19182. Can I have a mover? Ian, seconder? John, great. Discussion, anybody have any comments or concerns? Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, and maybe this is something we'll have to sit down with the fire chief on and have a discussion, because we're gonna have to, you know, there's gonna be development in that area. Like, we know what's across the track, and I think if there needs to be something worked out there. I'm looking at Kelly, because it can't just be, you know, no, don't recommend every single time that there is something that comes up in this area. That's not going to work for me. So we'll have to find something where we're balancing that. And I think we have in the past. We've had pretty lengthy discussions about some of these issues, and I think we got to a nice workable kind of solution on other issues. And I'm a little disappointed to see that response without any more context, because we have quite a bit of development over on that side. We've actually approved further development over on that side. So I just want to highlight that as a bit of a concern to me. I know it'll come up at council because we've had those discussions before. So maybe prior to this going to council, if we need to get together with Brett, then maybe we should do that, or there has to be some clarity around if that's just always going to be a blanket no for any development, then I think we got to change that. Yeah, we can't have that every single time, my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, noted, and I'll talk to the fire chief, and you know, I think if he's gonna have comments that don't support something, he should also be coming to these meetings, so we can actually ask him questions about what are your real concerns here. So, because if he does have concerns, all of council should be aware of what those real concerns are. So I think having him present is really important.
I agree.
And you know what, he happens to be off this week.
Okay.
So otherwise he would have been here.
Great.
So noted, and we'll make sure that he comes to council.
Okay.
To speak to it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kelly and Ian. Deb, you had a concern?
Yeah, I was gonna hold off until we talked about the future plans and priorities and such, but along the same lines as Ian, it's not all that useful to have a no without talking about what we can do to remediate these issues. You know, like there's got to be you know, some suggestions, and because I absolutely get that it's outside the 10-minute, but like Ian says, we've got a lot of development over there. So then we need to have a conversation about what meaningful steps we can do to offset those issues with, because, you know, we've got the planning group saying that they propose that we approve, and we got the fire chief saying, no, we shouldn't. And so there's got to be somewhere in between where we can all agree that, you know, this, if we do this, then at least we're doing what we can to alleviate some of his concerns.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Appreciate it. All right, John, you good?
Only had one question.
Sure.
You're saying, sorry, Sarah, this is more for you. The setback is to line up with the existing little screen room type area you see in the back. Because that's what the variance setback is for. Is that also ruining your fire setback from the existing property? So, which has got trees on it as well. So our fire chief should be here for this one as well, because access to the backside of that building is also getting greatly diminished as well. So I'm all for development, but if you look at this side of the house, if you were to have a fire, access, like especially near the back along the lagoon side, for fire staff to get to the back of that to fight that fire would be actually fairly difficult and risky, right? Because you're going to be between two buildings, right?
Yeah, not a lot of room between the trees and the.
Well, you wouldn't be able to fit between the trees and the proposed building, and you're just making access for firefighting worse. So the fire chief really should be here for this meeting as well.
Yep. No, I agree. And my comment would be the same as everybody is, you can build to code, and if it's close, I mean, they have 0 lot lines all over the world, and you should be able to build to code, and if fire truck can't get there within 10 minutes, that's something that we should be talking to the fire chief about and trying to figure out how we can say yes more often. But I agree for sure.
But
go ahead.
just on the 10-minute, I mean, the only reason. Okay, I mean, a fire truck can get there in 10 minutes. The only reason it possibly might not be able to get there in 10 minutes is because of the train. So there's a couple of hypotheticals in here that we're assuming that a fire truck cannot get there in 10 minutes. Well, that's assuming that the crossing is totally blocked, which how many times that happened? Well, we could probably look into that, right? So, that's why, like, the context of that comment is not very clear, and it's not, in my view, accurate. That there's a potential that it's outside of the 10-minute area, but right now it's not. If we had fire and the tracks are not blocked, it's easily within 10 minutes for a fire truck to get there. So yeah, I understand. Yeah, his concerns around that, but I think we also have to recognize that we've had developments over there. People's homes are protected with good fire protection. I don't want it to sound like it's not, but it's a little more nuanced than I think what the note kind of maybe classified. Maybe that's, I don't want to take verbatim that that's what Brett said in the note. That could just be something that came from planning, summarizing his concerns, but it'll have to be something I guess we'll to dig into a little bit more.
Great. Okay, well, that can go. Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Through the chair. So sorry, I just wanted to ask a question just to kind of see where the appetite is at. Because, knowing the chief and having had lots of conversations with him, he's very pro our wildfire policy that we have in our OCP. He's very pro, working with fire smart vegetation. And I know this committee isn't keen on cedars. These are long established.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where you sort of get into a gray area, which is why I'm asking, is there appetite? Because we could probably fairly easily get a yes, where, as a condition, like we could negotiate variance, okay, but maybe these cedars need to come down and be replaced with a fire smart option.
Yeah.
I don't know how much appetite there is for something like that.
Yeah, well, Sarah, we'll go for a vote here, but I think everybody's pretty much, I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but everybody's pretty much, it looks like, in favor of it. There is room around the other side of the house as well.
There's currently, but it's not like we can put a restriction on them in favor of these guys, right?
Yeah, there's 2 meters on the other side.
This particular house, it's a large open space on the other side. They do have a propane, one of those horizontal propane tanks down there, but otherwise it's completely open. It's all gravel, it's clear, and it looks like it's about 2 meters, yeah, on the other side. That runs right down the side of the house into the back.
Okay, yeah, no, I think, we can go, everybody's had, enough time to, view the concerns or anything? Yeah. Okay, we have, a motion and a seconder. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. So, yeah, I think, Sarah, we will maybe put that on our horizon for, long-range planning. Maybe we need to sit down with Brett and say, maybe the district of Sycamore needs to have a backup kit somewhere on district property on that side of the railway tracks that they can access it underneath maybe the park. Maybe with the new construction of the bridge, we can access, they can get one of their little carts underneath the railway bridge to be able to get access at least to hoses and a fire hydrant, because the fire hydrants are all there, and it could just be like an emergency response kit on the other side of the railway tracks, something like that.
Okay, and I think through the chair, sorry, I'm more asking when applications like this come in, if staff were to start asking these kind of questions of applicants, like, oh, hey, I see that's cedars, they're not a fire smart plant. Would you consider replacing them or taking them down to support your variance request? I don't know. This is why I'm asking.
Oh, yeah, I have some opinion on that.
I agree. Staff is, staff can reach out to the owners and talk to them and make recommendations.
Not necessarily this case, just in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think with existing beautiful vegetation like that, we have to be careful. I think it's an education thing around fire smart, and that's how you'll get actually the homeowners going, yeah, maybe that shouldn't be there. I would like to see more of a, hey, we want to let you know, the downside of these cedars right beside your house. I mean, I think everyone's getting really a lot more tuned into the wildfire risk. Obviously, we've had tragedies in the area. We've had almost our town burned down in 2021, and we kind of just got lucky, I think, based on where the wind was going that day that we didn't. So I think it's an education thing, but I think the more people learn, then I don't think people are going to want to do cedar hedges. So, but I mean, that's a pretty beautiful set of cedars. I wouldn't want to see us say, hey, take that down as part of this development. But I bet if we start giving people the education around it, they might get to that decision just on their own, where they don't want to have a fire hazard right beside their home. And I think that's probably where we'll get the best traction. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Ian. All right, everybody good? We'll move on. Item B, 23-255 ALC 515 Dogwood Avenue. I think that's Nicole.
Yeah, I'll take this one on.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, so this was originally supposed to be presented probably beginning of August, and we took a step back just to think about this a little bit more. And I've spoken with the owner. The owner might be in the audience there today to answer questions after this presentation. So the property is located at 515 Dogwood Avenue. It's that black outlined parcel, a good chunk of land at the end of Capel. So our recommendation today would be to get a resolution to apply to the Agricultural Land Commission to subdivide the property into 2 smaller lots and the remainder. Okay, location again with the ortho on the left. And then the OCP designation is rural. On the left, zoning is A1, agriculture and resource management. On the right, there's a chunk of the land that is in I would call it like an old floodplain. On the left, the property is in the 2-kilometer wildfire buffer area and a small overlap with the high hazard area at the base of the mountain. And on the right-hand side, you can see the mountain in red there for slope. Okay, so on the top right, that's a good representation of the proposal today. We've got lot A to the west and lot B to the east, and then the remainder at the north end there. And so the two smaller lots will be 0.252 hectares roughly, and the remainder at 6.75 hectares. So the OCP policies that align with this, a few here. The district supports economic development initiatives that specifically attracts young farmers and brings new agricultural initiatives and businesses to the area. Something the applicant has noted is that the proposed subdivision will support agriculture by providing an opportunity for a family to have their own garden. It's a good chunk of land. It's beautiful out there. I visited it with the owner, and they could have their own small production there. Residential use is supported in the rural and large holdings designation. And then for OCP, there's a restricted covenant already on title for that wildfire buffer area where they have to maintain their properties in accordance with fire smart principles.
Seized up. You all done, Nicole?
Yeah,
No.
no, I'm not. But this was the next slide. Yeah, sorry. So we had some internal comments. So building, they had no issues with the subdivision, but obviously they'll be involved in the building permit stage if something goes on those two new lots. By law, no objections. Fire department had no concerns with the subdivision application. And the one sticking point might be operations and engineering department, where they had concerns about access to proposed lot B, the eastern lot, because they won't have a constructed public road leading to it. And I have a slide to show that. And they also have some tricky sewer and water connections that we'll have to think about. So if you go to the next slide. I've just roughly drawn this in. It's not accurate. So I've got the two lots outlined in red. And then from our mapping, you can see the water lines in blue and then the sewer in yellow. So right now the proposal is for, I guess, the proposed eastern lot to be accessed by easement over the existing driveway that serves the remainder lot. Yeah, it runs along the north there. And then the eastern lot could, I mean, theoretically access Dogwood Avenue, but they probably will be accessing through the driveway that serves the remainder lot as well. Holly Avenue to the east is not constructed to district road standard. We don't maintain it, but there is a driveway that goes up to a property to the northeast. So that's, I guess, the proposal as it stands today. Access by easement by the one lot over the driveway. The one to the left could probably access Dogwood or the driveway. For sewer and water, the proposal is to connect off of Dogwood Avenue to both proposed lots. And so the easternmost lot would have an easement over the westernmost lot for their line that connects to Dogwood Avenue. So that's where I know we have to talk with operations and engineering more closely, because there's some issues with pressure, pumping stations, things like that, probably outside my realm. But we do need to have a follow-up with that department and the owner just to hash out what that could look like and if this type of access and connections are supported. I think that should be the last slide. Yep, back to the recommendation. Any questions or thoughts on that one?
Okay, thanks, Nicole, for that report. We'll just read the recommendation and then we can get a firster and seconder and have discussion. That the Planning and Development Committee recommend council to authorize the subdivision application to the BC Agricultural Land Commission for the property legally described at Lot 2, Section 31, Township 21, Range 7, west of the 6th Meridian, KDYD Plan EPP 50410, 515 Dogwood Avenue, to subdivide the subject property into two new lots and one remaining lot, which will equal 3 lots in total. May I have a mover? Ian, seconder, John, thank you. Discussion, anybody have any questions for Nicole? Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this recommendation would be made subject to the operations being able to service it. I've been involved in something in the past where land use was changed, and then they realized after the fact that it was a huge mess in terms of stormwater management. And, you know, like they never made it subject to that. So now they're all in court. Anyway, just a question.
Nicole, you have a
Yep. Nope,
response?
that's a great comment, and that could definitely be included.
Okay. Thank you. Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I support this because we're making a recommendation to the ALC that this should come out for housing, and, you know, I think that's the stage we're at. And then if the ALC comes back and approves that, there obviously have to be building permits, probably, I don't know, maybe in a rezoning, whatever. Like there'll definitely be an opportunity to hash out the sewer connections and water connections. So yeah, I think for today's purposes, it's a recommendation to ALC, and I support this coming out of the ALC, and hopefully they agree as well. Are you the proponents? Yeah, I wish you all the best. ALC it's a tough one. But it's nice to see. I personally think we should be ripping land out of the ALC to get housing built. I've felt that from the moment I got on council. I thought we have a lot of ALC property that could be activated for much needed housing and development in this town. And you know, this is a good example of it, right? It can still be housing, and it can still be used for agricultural purposes. So I think this is exactly the happy median we should be finding. And there's tons of places we could be doing this in Sycamoose. And I hope the ALC starts to see part of our problem with housing in British Columbia is ALC land that is not really great farmland, just sitting there under protected land uses. And, you know, then we turn around and we say, well, we have a housing crisis. Well, yeah, we've got to free up some of this stuff to actually get it built and to have something a little bit more productive to use with it. So I fully support it, and I hope the ALC gives you the go ahead.
Great, thank you, Ian. John, do you have anything?
I like the idea as well.
Yes. Great, thank you.
Hopefully we can get it to go through.
Yeah.
So I agree with Ian. I drove around this morning, and I was on the other side of the highway over by Rama, and there's just a ton of property over there that hasn't been farmed forever, and it's full of trees, and it's perfect prime development property, and we have it all throughout the community, and maybe it should have been something that should be, you know, if the premier's all bent on housing, maybe somehow try to relax the ALC to not just in Sycamoose, but everywhere, to utilize some of these properties that aren't being farmed and haven't been farmed forever. And Bryant's online, Bryant Labouré there, he's got another piece of property that's same thing, hasn't been farmed, and it could be great development property, but they won't let you do it. So this is I mean, they have in Sycamoose let some properties come out of the ALR, and this is a prime piece of property, and I hope it goes through, and I wish you well too. Go ahead there, Kelly.
Yeah, just for clarity, for this subdivision, they're not requesting it come out of the ALR, they're just requesting it be subdivided into smaller farm parcels.
Yeah.
Correct, Nicole?
Yeah.
Okay. Just,
Yeah. Good point, Kelly. I did pick that up too, when I was reading it.
Oh, okay. No,
In the ALR, it's just being subdivided, so it's being used for farm, but in a more like small farm.
right.
So it's a way to densify it still within the ALR.
Yeah.
They would have to approve that as well.
Correct.
That's what I mean, yeah.
By the ALR, which requires our support for their application to subdivide.
Great. Thanks very much, Kelly, for clarifying that. Great. Okay. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Okay, moving right along. Item C, 630 Riverside Avenue. We have a pre-application. Sarah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so they're not quite ready to come to this meeting. We hope to see them for next meeting.
Great. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's exciting news. Exciting news to see that happen.
And just,
Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, no, and so So they're, I believe, proposing to do something similar that what was proposed there previously.
Mhm.
Is that correct, Sarah?
Yeah, I didn't want to reveal too much because they're still sorting everything out. I
Yeah.
would prefer they told you, but it sounds like they're very interested in picking up the original project with some very minor changes. And we'll see what happens.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Well, go ahead, Ian.
Is that three boys talking about?
6:33, the old.
Okay, perfect, yes, excellent news.
Great. Okay, well, moving right along. Item D, long-range planning projects. Nicole, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so last meeting we did kind of just bring it up briefly that we were thinking about what our long range planning looks like. And so Steffi and Sarah had pulled together this slide just showing all the existing tools in our toolkit right now. Some are more recent, some I'm not even familiar with. But I think it's important that when we adopt these, maybe, you know, in particular, active transportation, parks and trails, that we start to look at some of the recommendations in those plans and implement them. So for parks and trails in particular, I know Steffi had some ideas about winter trails, which might fit in well with seasonal activities and winter activities, and also could connect in with anything that the development corporation is working on. So I don't know if anyone had put their minds to some priorities that they'd want to see pulled out of these documents or any other ideas. Open to discussion. And then I wasn't going to chat about this slide. This Sarah had thrown in some other things, maybe related to the plans on the previous slide, and hopefully she could speak to these about housing and a couple others on the right-hand side there.
Okay, that's great. We gotta start. Sarah, how would you?
Through the chair. Yeah, so these are items that are in stream. Some of them have sort of been set aside. Just wanting to come back to this committee and sort of maybe get a little bit of guidance, maybe like what your expectations are. So, you know, there's a bunch of things on here about housing strategy implementation. There was an ask under the previous iteration of this committee to update all our application forms as part of clarifying our application process and making it easier for people, making sure that information's out there. So we do have draft versions of all these updated forms. The way we were rolling them out was there are a number of bylaws and policies that need to be updated. But here's the ask, do you want us to just get the forms rolled out and sort out these other pieces a little later? So in terms of rolling them out, minor things that would need to happen in terms of there's a number of policies that would need to be either updated or rescinded because those policies contain our current application forms. And then in one case with our temporary use permits application form, that is enshrined within a separate procedure bylaw specifically for temporary use permits. And that bylaw, this is why it turned into a bit of a bigger project, was because that particular bylaw, it's a little confusing. There's a separate procedures bylaw for temporary use permits, and then there's a separate procedures bylaw for everything else. So I was looking at potentially combining them so that it was less confusing. And at the same time, we were looking at updating our existing development procedures bylaw because there have been some changes in legislation around notification processes. In terms of making it easier for local governments to make approval processes go faster. And then in addition to that, so these changes with notification, which largely happened around COVID because of COVID, they also added, at the provincial level, the ability for council to now delegate, aside from development permit approvals to staff, can also now delegate variances to staff. So this all ties back into housing strategy implementation and trying to create a fast track process where something is specifically for housing around there. So this was my question to you. Do you want to just get the new forms all rolled out so that we've got a nice, clean, pretty set of packages that have very clear information, guidelines, and checklists to help people through the process? and then continue working on the actual approval process as a separate piece. So that was one question. Because the approval process sort of overlaps into a bunch of things, not just housing strategy implementation, but also Main Street revitalization and supporting businesses in establishing new businesses on Main Street, any of the tenant improvements that they need to do, for example. So this was something I had mentioned before, you know, when someone wants to do a tenant improvement, update an existing building, how necessary is it that it has to go through a whole council approval process? You know, could it just be something that is delegated to, say, the CAO to approve? Of course there'd be things written in there, you know, guidelines like, you know what, anything over this size or this dollar value or something like that would need to go to council. Or writing in a process where anything that's delegated has to go through a public notification process, whether or not legislatively it's required. And if there's a negative response back, then staff can't approve it and it would have to go through council. For example, just these, you know, like stopgap measures so that, you know, there's still, we're checking out a little stink bug that's walking around on the counter here. Anyway, so that's kind of where that piece comes from. So that's just one, put a little pin in that. Aside from that housing strategy implementation, we did end up putting a hold on some of our low hanging fruit. So we had 2 amendment bylaws that are separate things. They're not the same thing that I was running together as part of housing strategy implementation. They've had public hearing. I just want to see, is there support on us bringing this back soon? The key one being the R1 zone amendment, where we were increasing the density for secondary dwellings. And I was hoping to have that in place so that it jives nicely with the plan library being set up with the district purchasing plans, and the housing committee is hoping to get that whole thing rolled out for spring so that there's a set of plans that people can take advantage of. So there's this whole thing going on with that. So I would like to bring back the R1 zone for 3rd reading, maybe November.
Yeah.
See how, yeah, okay. And then as far as the OCP updates, there were a number of pieces in there. So updating the OCP to implement portions of the housing strategy. So there's like some updates just in terms of housing policies in general. And then there was an update to the multifamily development permit area, which was pulled out as a separate piece to kind of take another look at it to see if it needed to apply to subdivision or not. I don't think it does, so we can bring that back. But the other component, sort of the big component, was this expanding the medium density land use designation into broader areas to help make it easier for developers to go through a zoning amendment process on a case-by-case basis. So this is as opposed to bringing in zoning that would reflect that. We wouldn't necessarily bring that in. It would be more just to make more land available where a proponent could move forward with some comfort in purchasing the land and coming forward for a case-by-case zoning amendment. So there was that piece. So just kind of, and maybe this is a conversation for the committee of the whole. I'm just trying to figure out if that whole OCP amendment bylaw needs to be broken up a little bit, or just trying to gauge the level of comfort with some of these things.
All right. Okay, discussion. Ian?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on what our long range planning should be. You know, overall, I think we have these little component pieces that are there. I mean, yeah, I get the rationale for doing it, but I don't think council at this point, or this council's at this point, had a really good chance to go, what type of town do we want? How does this going to develop, and where are the, you know, what is the vision for the town? And I think we have all these little building blocks that kind of fill in that vision, but no one's really talked about, okay, well, what do we want Sycamus to look like? Like, what, I mean, we know pieces of it, right? We know we want to do downtown revitalization. We know we'd like to have Main Street filled in, but, you know, we also have some pretty permissive highway commercial zoning, things like that's in bylaw 1000 that could detract from that, right? So all of these things are out here in the ether, but it hasn't really come together in, I think, a coherent vision yet, because we've been doing it, we've done a housing needs assessment, we know we need housing, but have we set targets? I'd like to see us set targets every year for how many housing units we would like to build. Just so it's not to say, hey, we missed it, it's for us to know if we missed it or if we hit it, right? And to have something to benchmark our success against. So I'd like to see, we're gonna talk about some of these projects really focus in on bylaw 1000 and maybe not a full review of the OCP, but definitely a look at it, like as part of, here's what we think the town should look like in the next 10, 20 years. And these are the policies that we want to actually have in place to drive it. And I think we're there, we just haven't had that kind of discussion. I think the big blocks of it were pretty, I hear a lot of, common discussion in this committee, but also at council about where people want to see us kind of go. But I don't think we just had it all linked together. So if we did one long range kind of chunk, that's where I would like to see it go. Then I think the stuff that Sarah's talking about, we'll figure out how that flows into that, right? But having that first piece examined it a little bit more, I think is pretty critical. And yeah, that's kind of my high level thoughts. I mean, I like where we're all going. I mean, in terms of single family zones, there really is no such thing as a single family zone anymore. The province has already said you're allowed to have 4 housing units, right? So we have to figure out how that even looks, right? But I think if we don't step back and look at it from a 30,000 foot overview, we're missing maybe a really good opportunity to do that. And then I think we really do need to look really closely at bylaw 1000. And we need to look at what, if you went and you did all the stuff that we have in these zones, in all the areas that we've allowed it, how does the town look if that actually comes to pass, right? And I think that's the piece when we passed bylaw 1000, we didn't really have enough time, or I don't know if we were thinking about all of the potential implications of that, whether it's from housing or commercial development or, just a lot of aspects, or just how the town would look after those developments came forward. So I think it's important that we take a second pass at those big pieces. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Anybody else? Sean?
Just fairly small thing, because I do believe you spoke that we do have a study being done on all the infrastructure, like water and sewer as well. Do we have a date when that's supposed to be completed? Because that would actually heavily impact a lot of what we're talking about, because that's going to put restrictions on some kind of ours.
Good point, John. Go ahead, sir.
Through the chair. Yeah, so the housing strategy does contemplate all that, right? So we did this whole process where we did consultation with the public. We looked at our OCP. So we did ask a lot of questions, knowing that these things could then come back to update the official community plan. So yes, we received the funding to do the study. That work had already started. There's portions of it that already started that operations had started. And then the portion that we're tacking on is modeling, looking at density increases, right? To help us figure out locations where we could implement zoning. So as far as the official community plan goes, it's not implementing zoning. It's putting in place land use designations that reflect the housing strategy and the outcomes of that. And then any zoning would then reflect what comes out of this study. So that should be done by October 2024. And so anything prior to that wouldn't happen until after that, because that's going to guide kind of where that stuff will go. So there are things that the district will need to do to help increase our housing targets. So we have housing targets for the next 3 years as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund application. So that did go in. We're potentially, eligible for over $1 million. A lot of that would go into infrastructure updates, from an internal discussion perspective, in terms of where the money is needed, a lift station upgrade is needed, update it from 2-phase to 3-phase power kind of thing, in one of our key neighborhoods. So in terms of the secondary dwelling component, that's kind of a low risk move, because we have a lot of large family homes that are serviced for what's there, that there's only two people living in, right? So the secondary suites are basically adding extra bedrooms that are basically replacing bedrooms in an existing house that it's not being used. So it wasn't felt there was a lot of risk with doing that, because not everybody's going to put in a suite or even these extra suites. So that was sort of a low risk, high level thing that could be done.
Sarah, back to the timing of when that will be done, like
October 2020.
October 2024.
Oh, year
Yeah.
now.
Okay,
Yeah, so
sorry.
one thing we could do for next meeting, we could bring the Housing Accelerator Fund application just to kind of go through it with you, so you can kind of see where these are, because there's low hanging fruit that takes into account this need to do this infrastructure assessment. And then there's, other changes, all of it is subject to council approval, every single piece. But it includes an action plan with different actions that council could take to achieve those goals. And it looks at it from this perspective, that we need infrastructure to serve it, that we need to take a better look at what's there and making sure that land uses make sense where they go.
Great, okay.
Yes.
Thanks,
That's got
sir. Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said, but I guess I would put it to Sarah and the planning group and Nicole, is on this whole issue of streamlining things so people can get stuff done. I know there's some question about the temporary use permit, but as much as it may not be a great tool for getting us to our absolute vision of the community, it seems to have been a great tool for getting some things done that have been a net benefit to the community. And the more we can do things that make the community look better, the more people start to take notice, the more they buy into the vision, the more that we get there. So I love the long-term plan. It's why I participate in the official community plan, but I also am a strong proponent of, like taking whatever steps are necessary to make positive changes to get us to that ultimate goal. And so I guess what I'm coming back to is, with the temporary use permit application forms, what we can do to make things easier for people that just want to get things done.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Yeah, I kind of think that it is a big conversation that maybe council should have, or just even a quick presentation to let them know what we're working on our long range planning projects. So Kelly, your thoughts, like, would that be something we could bring to council fairly soon, so Sarah can, keep the ball rolling?
Yeah, most definitely. So there's a lot of items that we could look at. So from a larger scope or more detailed. So leave it with staff and we'll come up with some options. And I think having a discussion at the committee of the whole with all of council. And because that will also tie to our budget discussions in terms of what we're putting our financial resources to, because these things take staff time and sometimes we need consultants to help us through it. So I think especially like what I'm hearing too is I think it's important for an overall OCP and zoning, like kind of relook, because the OCP was done in 2016 was when we did the last OCP review. And I know we do have some money in the budget for that. That was a direction previously versus just parts here and there. I'm kind of hearing like an overall look at the OCP. And then when we do that, we can look how the zoning ties to it. So we can do some, actual deep thought on both. So leave it with us and we'll return.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Ian, do you have anything else?
No, I definitely agree with what Kelly just summed up there. I think there's an appetite at council, for that discussion. I think it's an important discussion. And certainly John and Deb should be part of that too, is that the world really has changed since we did that 2016 OCP. I mean, there were single family zones. There isn't anymore. You know, back in 2016, there wasn't necessarily, there was a housing crunch. I wouldn't call it a crisis, but there's definitely at a crisis level now. There certainly wasn't a housing crisis in Secondwest in 2016. I mean, housing values were a lot less than what they are now. We're getting hit with a lot of issues that were in Vancouver in 2016, but weren't necessarily here. And then I think just in terms of how we really, I think council needs to have this discussion about what we ultimately do with Main Street and how it's been on the books for a long time, right? About where we want development and we have tax incentives, but we haven't really gotten a lot of traction. There's plans, there's things in the work, but it would be nice to step back and say, here's the 30,000 foot. Here's really where we want to go, and we want to zero in, target that, and then figure out what to do to make that actually happen. So I think it would be a good discussion to have, so.
Great, thanks, Ian. Steffi?
No, I was just thinking when Ian talked about the visioning exercise. So in 2020, I think the council worked with a consultant to kind of vision what the downtown of Sycamores would look like. And that's like, as a result of that visioning exercise was the downtown development plan document. So it sort of categorizes each sub areas and what each sub areas should consider, like in terms of development, streets, sidewalks, active transportation and everything. So that, yeah, I don't think we have a printed copy, but we could.
And does that tie to any of our OCP?
Yes, so
It
that
does.
was created based on the OCP policies and guidelines. And that time we didn't have zoning bylaw, so it was sort of to inform the zoning bylaw and all the other actions. But
I'll pop it back on the slide.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Through the chair. So this is what we've been working towards, the planning department, for a few years. Picked up some projects from Melinda after Melinda left. So part of it was the Main Street project that Melinda was working on, as well as the housing needs assessment. So we've gotten a bunch of other studies and pieces done since then. And the intention is for all these pieces, these are all things that become part of the official community plan. So we almost have everything we hope to have, and we might not end up having everything. A big piece was the master transportation plan. And we, it is what it is. It'll just be another update later once that's done in terms of updating our transportation network. But yeah, I think we've got enough material here. However, this is a bigger project than what you might think it could be. In terms of doing things quick and dirty, with the housing strategy, we know we really need housing and we need to do something now. So that's why that's a separate foray into an update, to just get it in place, to kind of keep up with opportunities to get money to support getting more housing, for example. So there are still going to be little things, I think, that we kind of need to prioritize. But yeah, I agree with you 100% in terms of, we've done lots of work here that's ready to be put into a big plan that we can then, council can look at it, we can reveal to the public, get feedback, and make sure all these pieces are speaking to each other through the OCP. But just so it is a big project, and it's probably at this point something that we may need to hire a consultant for, but
Great. Okay, that's great. Nicole, did you have anything to add?
No, this has been great. I did learn some new things today. I think my thought, maybe along the housing line, is just really keeping our eye on what the province is doing, and hopefully whatever we're doing aligns with that, or if they're doing something for us that we don't duplicate that work. I know there's going to be a lot of legislation tabled this fall, so I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Great, okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, just one last thing. I guess what I'm suggesting is more like an alignment discussion rather than another big plan. We have all these plans. We spent lots of money on really lots of good plans. I don't think we need another big, huge rehash of that. But what we do got to have is get the policy folks that are around this table kind of aligned, and I think we just haven't had that kind of discussion, right? And so you're talking a lot about different pieces, but in terms of like more, cohesive plan. I think we have it all. But we haven't had discussion at council on kind of what we're looking at and where the results that we're looking at. And that's what I'm more talking about. And I think an update to the bylaw 1000 is part of it. Maybe the OCP, same thing. There's already all these component pieces, but I don't think I have to rip everything down and then do another plan. I definitely don't need that, but I think a good beginning of a discussion around alignment and priorities would be a very healthy thing to have at council, with the backdrop of, hey, we're gonna kind of look at, are we good on the OCP, and how does that flow into bylaw 1000? And then do tweaks and amendments there. And maybe that flows into something bigger. Well, I guess we'll see, but just to have the discussion. So I don't want to say like we have to, certainly don't have to, redo everything. We just have to kind of connect the dots, I think, at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
We'll have a planning day with council
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
when you get back from vacation.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's in order for sure. Okay, everybody else got enough information for that? But staff is gonna put some things together. Anybody, Brian, did you have something you wanted to say there? You were chomping at the bit there. Look like.
That's just, no, thanks for sitting here. I just had one little comment, and it was from a few years ago, when Kelly was in place, Paul was in place. I'm not sure if they're, we were talking about the possibility of the restrictions on franchises in the downtown core and possibly doing something like that. And I think the answer was no, it's too hard. And which I did love to hear that answer. And I think it was kind of like, it's not you gotta do this, you gotta do that. Anyway, I just wanted to bring it up again, not to kick the dead horse, but Nicole, sitting in your position now, it just might be a good time to say, I think it's a great idea, and we have an opportunity to look at it. That goes back to some of the things you were talking about looking at the OCP and the vision. So I just thought I'd bring it up one more time, and then I only have to bring it up another 25.
Yeah, I know you were kind of chomping at the bit there. I thought you had something to say. Okay, no, well taken. Sarah?
Not just questioning staff, is that a possibility? Is it a possibility to restrict franchises like
Through the chair, legislation won't let you restrict specific businesses. You have to be fair and equal to all businesses. But things that you can do are structural things, which is one thing that was implemented through the new zoning bylaw, where we're supporting very small parcel sizes in the downtown area for commercial businesses to support smaller live work type scenarios. Franchises are typically big, they're large, and they need large areas of land. So for example, Tofino was one that was brought up a lot. And you don't see a lot of franchises in their town core, and it's because they evolved as a small fishing community with very small parcels. We're talking a couple hundred years back. And so, and a lot of it is already developed and they're just working with what's there. So there aren't a lot of opportunities for land consolidation to support putting in some big franchise. So they are a lot of local businesses that are there.
Yeah.
And that's how that's achieved. You have to come at it from a different way because legally you can't say no franchises.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Sarah.
Maybe just.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I have to disagree with you there, Sarah. I mean, there's actually quite a few large parcels in Tofino that could have been put together into these sort of formats. They've decided that's not what they wanted. And there's not just Tofino, there's Harrison Hot Springs, there's multiple different examples of where this has become a discussion in a community of how you build it and how you build it out and what is the values of the community. This is the discussions we should be having. Absolutely, because everything then flows from there. And so we know just based on some of the discussions we've had at council that we do have a lot of leeway of but we have to be clear in what we're going to allow and what we're not going to allow. Like what we have now is a very extensive list of everything that we allow in these zones, which if you look at other bylaw thousands in other towns, it's a lot more restrictive list. So, you know, there's, you know, when it comes to policy directions, council is allowed to have a very significant amount of leeway. It just has to have clarity and it has to be, yes, apply to everybody, but there's no reason why we cannot have things in downtown or things in Main Street that reflect the character of Main Street and what we want. So yeah, I think this is what I was talking about. Like, we have to have that kind of policy alignment discussion, because there's gonna be difference of opinions on it, but I think it's a good discussion to have. I certainly have a much different vision for Sycamoose than maybe what even a couple other council members have, but I think we can get there, and I think that's where this town should go. So that's why I ran, and I'd love to have that discussion.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Well, I think Kelly's right. I think it sounds like a planning meeting with council, and it's a big conversation that we have to have. All right, well, that was a pretty quick meeting. We'll move right along to adjournment. Nicole, you're good with everything you got there?
Yeah, no, this was a discussion. I'm excited.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Recommended the Planning Development Committee meeting for October 4th, 2020 be adjourned at 10:08. Can I have a mover? John, seconder Ian, all those in favor? Yep, thank you. Good.
All right.
I was going to do that on.
That'd be it.
Come back on the podium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Next year, another meeting.